Breaking today, President Trump overturning a brief suspension of ICE traffic stops, calling it an effective crime-fighting tool for immigration agents.
So, as we've had to do several times in the past year, I suppose we must once again address the recurring hoax that Trump isn't doing deportations, or more specifically, you may have heard this going around, Trump caved to the Democrats on deportations. First, they said that was after Minneapolis. Now they're saying after these recent ICE-involved shootings involving people trying to ram them with cars. And every single time, that is simply not true. And I would note, oftentimes, not all, sometimes it is in good faith, right? People do care about this issue. They want to see our immigration agenda enforced, and I respect that. I think positive pressure is a good thing. But let's be honest, I've also heard this from a lot of bad faith actors who are simply just rooting against the Trump administration or encouraging Republican boycotts of the midterms, or even vote for Democrats out of protest because Republicans have betrayed you or something like that. So do consider the sources oftentimes that this type of rhetoric is coming from. But still, nonetheless, what we have had to bring up many times is we know that Trump has not caved on deportations after Minnesota because the data shows the opposite, right? The deportations have now gone up dramatically, as a matter of fact, following the departure of Kristi Noem and Greg Bovino and after Minneapolis. So you can say all you want in theory that Trump caved on deportations because we hear less about immigration in the news, but if you look at the deportation data and see that it's nearly doubling ever since Minneapolis, how can you seriously sit there and say Trump caved on deportations? So we addressed that one before. Now let's talk about this whole new idea that, oh, Trump's going to give up on traffic stops involving ICE because of the recent shootings. And today, Trump indeed came out and said that is not going to happen. And even as it pertains to the initial story of how, oh, ICE was giving this stuff up, that even in itself was missing context that a lot of people freaked out about, but didn't read the full headline, right? What it was actually saying. But nonetheless, let's talk about this, right? Is it true that ICE is not going to be doing traffic stops? Did they give up because a couple of shootings involving deranged, crazy people took place recently? Well, it's not really true, but let's talk about it, right? Because I think it's very important that while, again, positive pressure is a good thing, okay? Objectively, there are not enough deportations. There will never be enough, by the way, because in an ideal world, we snap our fingers, it's 20 million in an instant, right? But that type of pressure, hey, we want this agenda. We voted for this. Keep doubling down on it. Keep pushing. That is good. But I do not think that demoralization propaganda, especially when it's not rooted in truth, is productive. And you see that translating where after this whole kind of headline went out yesterday, certain actors are suggesting boycott Republicans or boycott the midterms entirely because they caved on deportation and Trump caved on deportation. When I repeat, that's not what happened, right? So that's why I say there's good faith. Hey, keep deporting, keep it up. Here's what we should do better. There's bad faith of, again, just trying to demoralize the Republican base to ultimately serve the left and hand them power. Let's talk about that, though. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, so here was the headline yesterday that we waited to comment on for a reason, right? But per multiple federal sources, this is what was heard. ICE has been instructed by Markwayne Mullin, right, head of Homeland Security, to immediately seize most vehicle stops during immigration enforcement operations nationwide, except for operations targeting the most egregious criminal aliens. This comes after 2 people were killed by ICE in shootings in Texas and Maine last week. We talked about both of those incidents that began as vehicle stops. DHS alleges one of those incidents was a ramming attempt. And so I immediately see how this headline could be interpreted very badly, right? They're giving up on the vehicle stops, and hey, if people get violent or erratic, doesn't that prove that maybe you should be stopping their vehicle? Why are we seizing on this? Why are we caving on deportations? It's very important, right? Blah, blah, blah. All true, by the way. All true. Totally agree. But here's, first of all, the context that even yesterday was missing. And now coming out today, a total repudiation of this by Trump himself. So let's talk about that. But first of all, why was there a seize on this? Was it because we're permanently getting rid of traffic stops because, hey, the Democrats are causing problems about it, so we're just going to give up our agenda? No. If you read down further, Bill Malugin here says, I'm told this will be temporary until ICE officers receive new training on vehicle stops. So even back then, even yesterday, we weren't talking about we're stopping this altogether because of political pressure. Basically, this is temporary. There's new training. Now, I 100% understand how oftentimes that type of rhetoric can be used as an excuse to stop it altogether, right? They never resume it. But at the same time, if we're to take it in good faith, it might not even be entirely irrational or that crazy of an idea, considering, yeah, the same problem keeps on happening. It's not particularly ICE's fault, but should we maybe give some new insight on how to handle it? Sure, that's something to consider, right? It doesn't sound crazy. Now, that said, that's not even the end of it. Because today Trump came out and just straight up said that's not happening, right? Tom Homan further backs up, nope, they don't need new training. We're doubling down 100%. So here is the update as of this morning. Trump came out and said, the men and women of ICE are doing a great job, one that has to be done. Crime is way down in America, in many cases with numbers that haven't been seen in decades. The open border policy of sleepy Joe Biden allowed 25 million people to pour into our country unchecked and unvetted. Many were criminals, and we have to get them out. And here's the kicker. In order to do this, we must be strong, tough, and smart, and we cannot give up one of ICE's most important and effective crime-fighting tools, the traffic stop. Once we do, we are playing right into the criminals' hands. So he's basically saying, not going to happen, right? What you heard yesterday, maybe there was some confusion, maybe Trump stepped in single-handedly, overrode it, whatever, right? But basically, he's saying no. Once we do, we're playing right into the criminals' hands. The radical left Democrats would love to see this done, which I tend to agree with, but it won't happen on my watch. ICE, be judicious, fair, and smart, and go back and do your very important job. Keep those crime stats records coming. Remember, you are loved and respected in America. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Tom Homan today further in an interview seemed to suggest he also was kind of the guy who stepped in and helped to override this policy change, because what he pointed out is that much like, and I guess in a sense BLM also does, they talk all the time about this idea that police need more training or ICE needs more training. But basically what he did was review the training that ICE receives on vehicle stops and said, no, they don't need more, right? They are adequately trained. By the way, ICE by and large, maybe there's some ways you could advise them to handle crazy domestic terrorists, but ultimately, they're not the problem. They're not the bad guy in this situation. Crazy lunatics trying to run them over with cars are the bad guys. So take a listen here to what he had to say just this evening.
Well, it's my understanding the officers involved in these shootings are well trained. They're not a part of that new hires. I looked at just before I did this interview, Griff, I asked ICE to give me the training curriculum for the academy, and there's an extensive vehicle stop training, much like the Border Patrol has. So again, we'll let this play out where it is, but I think ICE is going to continue doing record arrests, record removals, and this is, I wouldn't even call it bumping the road. I mean, this is going to be a short-term review. So ICE feels comfortable that their agents are safe, they're doing the right thing, and get back to doing what they do best, which is making vehicle stops. But like I said, I'll say it again. But there are options during this short time period to arrest a alien before he gets in a moving weapon and arrest him after he stops. There are various stops. I've arrested aliens in all sorts of conditions in my career, and every arrest is different. All the extenuating circumstances for that arrest are different. And the agents are well trained to make those decisions. I think they're making the right decisions.
Yeah, so basically, to make a long story short, they didn't cave. Trump stepped in and said, keep doing traffic stops, ICE, keep doing your thing. We're not going to rein you in. We're not going to make you out to be the bad guy. We're going to keep doing the very effective recent deportation strategy that we have been engaging in. Now, if you are a person yesterday who sat in good faith and criticized the initial reporting and said, I don't agree with this, this should not happen, then fair enough, right? Positive pressure, as I said, is a good thing. But if you're going to be someone now today who doesn't also respond by giving credit where it's due and saying, hey, thank you to Trump for overriding that or reversing or whatever even words you want to use for it, but stepping in and saying, like, we're not going to be caving on that. But that's the thing, is that a lot of these characters who criticize also don't like to give credit. And that's where we get this whole idea, these talking points that you may have heard of, coming from nefarious, basically neo-never-Trumpers, like they can call themselves what they want, but this is really the thing, where they try to sell this idea to Republican voters that, oh, you know, Trump hasn't done anything and he's betrayed you and you're not getting what you voted for. I voted for deportations. Where are the deportations? Okay, we've like pointed out, here are the deportations, right? You understand? And by the way, how could he have caved on deportations if, according to you, he hasn't been doing them in the first place? Like, do you understand how that logic is kind of inconsistent? But still, nonetheless, right? That's why I encourage you, good faith is fine. Good faith pressure is fine. Bad faith criticism is not. Okay, so let's tell the story in context. Yesterday, DHS said they're going to try to stop and do a short, like, administrative review before they go back to doing traffic stops. Today, Trump stepped in and said to DHS, no, keep them on the streets, keep doing their thing, because it's not necessary to cave to Democrats like this. So that's the full story of what happened. You're going to tell the story, tell the full story, right? But I'm sick of, for example, seeing posts like this. Okay, we gotta call some people out here. For example, Tomi Lahren today. Okay, she comes out and says the following. And as I said, this is what we call demoralization propaganda. And it's bad faith. Why? Because it's not aligned with reality. And so, yeah, if you're like lying about the Trump administration or the GOP or whatever, as a like conservative figure, to ultimately, right, you're not aligned with reality and you're pushing the goal to demoralize the base and encourage them to literally allow Democrats and leftists to win. That's what I call bad faith, bad actor type of behavior, right? But anyways, here's what she says. She says, real question, and I don't care who it pisses off. Why should we vote for Republicans in November? And her big reason, this was in response to the headline initially yesterday that maybe DHS had caved, which again ended up not being true. So let's tell that in context. But what she says is, mass deportations aren't happening. Most of us are single-issue voters on immigration, and DHS under Markwayne has decided they would rather appease CNN and MSNBC. She then goes on to talk about Republicans won't pass Save America. They won't support the deportations we voted for. They haven't done, frankly, jack blank outside of a tax cut extension, and then goes on here to say, vote Republican, get Democrat policy anyway. As if, by the way, I mean, our last video, we were literally just criticizing Republicans over the Save America Act, so it's not as if we're telling people that the GOP, especially in the Senate, is somehow perfect. But I even said in that video, it's also delusional to say they're no different from the Democrats, right? You want to talk about immigration? So let's, first of all, we'll address the deportations point in a second. But first of all, you claim mass deportations are not happening. Okay, well, under Democrats, you don't just get no deportations. You get, let's not forget, 10 million people pouring over the border. You mean to tell me this administration and the prior one are the exact same on the immigration issue? That is completely delusional. We have net negative migration for the first time in several decades. We have a 25% reduction, for example, in H-1B applications under the new, $100,000 visa fee. We have a completely secure, basically airtight border. And by the way, as we pointed out many times before, this talking point is not true. Mass deportations are not happening. We've said it before, we've explained these numbers before, but let's briefly do it again. It actually is the largest single interior removal deportation operation in U.S. history by far. Literally, Trump is doing things, to quote himself, that have never been done before when it comes to deportations. Now, you can sit there and say, the numbers aren't enough. And sure, that's absolutely true. We obviously always need more deportations, and it's fine to say that. But at the same time, let's not sit here, and this is like my frustration, is that people, I guess, like completely forgot how American government actually works, right? They think you can just snap a finger and like immediately do everything that you want. Like deportations are actually a challenge, you know. They cost money. You have to find these people. You have to fight. By the way, let's not forget extensive legal challenges, like they sue over every single one of these people. Literally, they're climbing over violent Antifa terrorists in the streets, like to get all of that done, right? Like it is a process, and you might say, "Oh, but over the span of 4 years is not going to be enough." Yes, that's true, but that's why we need to keep winning elections and keep building on progress. Because newsflash, it's way easier to open the border and let a bunch of people in at once than it is to now we have to go around the country and find all these people. So, and you know, again, let's be good faith. And it's as if some people don't remember, by the way, what a normal presidency looks like. Like, do you even remember, for example, I mean, Tomi Lahren, where did she get famous from? A big kind of Republican mouthpiece during the first Trump administration? Okay, fine. Are we like forgetting what the first Trump administration looked like? And I'm not saying by any means that the second administration is perfect. No presidency is perfect, but it's also just an objective fact. When we look at the wins we are getting, sure, in some ways it feels like we're not getting a lot done, but let's also have some context here, some perspective. Like, we still do live in this system with what you might call the checks and balances, and I don't mean that just in terms of the Constitution. Let's not forget also, this is the 21st century. We have this like judicial monster that we have to fight with every single time. You see what happens in the courts. We have the bureaucracy, the so-called deep state, the NGO machine, violent leftists out in the streets, many different things that are trying to stifle the agenda, and yet we're still getting more done than, I repeat, any conservative president has, arguably since World War II. And if you want to maybe say, I don't know, Eisenhower did more, Reagan did more, okay, fine. But at the very least in several decades. So then that's why I get irritated when people sit here and say, oh, he's not doing anything. Nothing is happening. This would be indistinguishable from the Democrats. It's as if you people have the memory of a goldfish. Do you not remember what Democrats were doing when they had power literally about 2 years ago? Like, do you not remember what that was like? You know? But on the front of those deportation numbers, let's address it, since some people want to bring that up, right? Of, oh, no deportations. Okay. So as we've explained many times, first of all, a lot of people bring up this argument, for example, that Trump's not deporting anyone because look at the Obama deportations. Obama deported more. As we've said many times, that's actually not true. The Obama administration conflated basically returns with removals, which is to say, counting them all in the same deportation spreadsheet. So what that's basically stating here, to paraphrase, is that anytime, and you remember, the migrant crises happened many times at different periods of the Obama administration, every time someone showed up at the border and got turned away or basically sent back, that's counted as a deportation. That is obviously different from a removal, which is to say, you go into the interior of the homeland, find and locate an illegal alien and go take them out, right? The most Obama ever got in a single year there was around 300,000. As we've said before, back in 2025, Trump's first year, keep in mind, one big beautiful bill doesn't pass until the summer. ICE agents are still being hired. We're still kind of starting the work on this. Already 500,000 deportations. So even in Trump's first year, which is, you know, he wasn't even the president the whole year. He was getting acclimated. Still, by far, when it comes to actual removals, right? Actual kind of interior deportations, that set a historic record. It's the most of any president in U.S. history. So we can argue the number should be higher, but you can't just say something is not happening when indeed it is happening. But then what's theory number two? I've heard this not just from Tomi Lahren, but a lot of people. They make Markwayne Mullin the scapegoat. They basically try to argue in bad faith because they're simply wrong. They are not correct about this. That after Minnesota, Trump went soft and he decided to cave on deportations because he was scared of the heat he was getting from the Democrats. And then often it coincides with, oh, he started the whole Iran war as a distraction because he completely abandoned or betrayed America. Well, that is also not true. Because say what you will about Markwayne Mullin, I was completely honestly neutral on him when he came into power because I just wanted to see how he's actually going to do. But it is now also likewise an objective fact. That's not true because guess what has happened ever since Markwayne Mullin replaced Kristi Noem at DHS after the whole Minneapolis thing? The deportation numbers have gone up significantly. So we're now looking at, by the way, as of June of this year, 900,000 total removal deportations, which we're on pace to, if we're on pace to have about 800K this year, that's nearly double what we had last year, under mostly the Mullin administration. But look at these numbers, okay, side by side. So before the one big beautiful bill passed, which is to say, early months of Trump's presidency, we're still kind of transitioning off of the Biden regime. The ICE and DHS were averaging 700 deportations daily, and these numbers are important. Under the Kristi Noem administration, after the one big beautiful bill passed, you already see the immediate consequences of that: 1,400 deportations daily. So after one big beautiful bill, we managed to double the deportation numbers, which, by the way, is why big beautiful bill was so tangibly important. Never forget the rhino grandstanders who were against this bill. I wonder who they were. Some of those people often are also now criticizing Trump for not doing enough deportations when you literally opposed the bill that gave him the funding and resources to do the deportations, jackass. Like, what are you talking about? But okay, anyways, right? So doubled it under Kristi Noem, but only 1,400 deportations. Now, in the Markwayne Mullin era, folks, we're averaging 2,400 deportations daily, which again is nearly double what we were getting under Kristi Noem. By the way, you might have heard recent headlines. Ro Khanna, Democrats are melting down about this. ICE is now at the rate where they're arresting about 10,000 people a week. Okay? So, again, is that not still enough? Sure. Again, we always want more deportations. We need more, but let's also understand that it's a struggle, sure. But where's anybody getting this idea that Markwayne Mullin is this like Democrat plant and he's caved on deportations, right? Like, say what you will about Minneapolis or the optics, or maybe you think Greg Bovino should still be there, or Kristi Noem should still be there. Okay, whatever. But what I've pointed out, it's just objectively true. Look at the data. There was no caving that took place. In fact, the Markwayne Mullin administration, just by the numbers, is significantly more effective than Kristi Noem or Greg Bovino ever were. Now, we have argued maybe our theories as to why that could be the case. I'm not here, for example, to throw Kristi Noem completely under the bus, because objectively, she still did double the deportation numbers in her own right. But frankly, maybe one could argue that, first of all, now we're kind of getting a system into place. We're getting into a routine, and we haven't abandoned that routine. So that's why the deportations go up and up, right? More ICE agents getting hired, that funding's kicking in, all of those things. But then also likewise, there's probably a case to be made that under Markwayne Mullin, the strategies of ICE have been much more focused on like actual deportations than performance, right? I mean, that is something you could argue, because last year, as great as it was, as fun and awesome as it was, maybe there's something to be said about storming a liberal city and making this whole scene basically to mess with the libtards is funny and cool and all. But if you actually want like real hard numbers, maybe be more low key about things, and, then you draw less heat from leftist protesters and ICE can do their job, whatever you want to say, right? But nonetheless, it really doesn't matter. The whole point is what? The Markwayne Mullin regime is actually more effective than the prior regime, which means we're getting better at deportations, not worse, okay? So that's why I'm sick of people again saying that the deportations are not happening or mass deportations are not happening. At this rate, by 2027, we're going to be like averaging hopefully over 1 million deportations a year. Now, again, if we have, let's say, 15 to 20 million illegal aliens in this country, is that enough? Obviously, it's not, right? But it's also, let's have perspective here, by far the most that's ever been done. I repeat, some people, and I know I keep repeating myself, but I want to hammer these points home, right? Some people maybe don't know how U.S. government works and think that we can just again, snap a finger and get all this stuff out. But no, this takes time. But that's also why, by the way, Tommy Lahren, if we're making this progress, and according to you, you are a single issue voter on immigration, which I would say I am too, but that's also why I understand it's existentially important. We cannot let Democrats win anything, right? Because even if they just win the House or something, they're going to, at the very least, try to shut down the government or hold up funding for DHS, right? They're going to do everything they can to try to obstruct, okay? even if they don't fully able, if they're not fully able to impeach Trump, holding any chamber of government is obviously leverage. We know they did the DHS shutdown already. They could try to do that again or something more extreme. We'll hold out for longer, right? So that's actually a case not to vote for Democrats and why Republicans are indeed different from Democrats. And on this mass deportation issue, if mass deportations actually are happening and you don't want anything to get in the way of that, it is extremely counterproductive to be encouraging Republican voters effectively not to vote and allow Democrats to win and say everything is the same. Really? You think this right here, 2,400 deportations a day is like just quote unquote the same as what the Democrats were doing? And by the way, you think that these numbers will somehow magically go up if the Democrats take power? That the Democrats aren't going to try to get in the way and stop this, right? Like, give me a freaking break. Let's not play into bad faith nonsense. Let's not promote, first of all, just lies. But then secondly, let's not use those lies to advance an agenda that is ultimately counterproductive to deporting illegal aliens, if that's your entire point, right? I am so sick of dealing... And this is not just targeted at Tommy, just to be clear. There's a lot of people who say this. I'm so sick of dealing with people who are like just straight up not telling the truth about this to advance nonsense like that. Mass deportations are happening. If you want more, then you have to keep handing our people more political capital and time to get that done, which means every single national election needs to be a priority to all of us, right? Trump's not going to deport every illegal by 2028. I never believed that was going to happen because I just knew the math. I knew how hard this was going to be. But this is the start of our political project. If you want it to keep happening, it's very simple. We have to keep winning. We have to keep building on our progress. It is not productive to advocate to burn down all of the progress that we're making or pretend as if there's no progress, okay? Let's stay in the race together. Let's stay on the team. All right? Let's not be complete idiots about this. Anyways, that said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.